everybody hear me? It's about 5 after 4, and I would just like to call this public meeting for November 5th, 2011 to order. And I'll just open the meeting and I'll turn it over to Secretary Griffin for his comments and provide us with a update on lake issues. We do appreciate y'all traveling out today, and you've had a busy day, and appreciate the extra time at the end of the day. So, if everybody could please stand and pass control, if you could all have an indication. I invite you to go ahead and bow your head with me. Lord God, the Scripture says you are the giver of all good gifts, and every single person here today can think of good gifts that you have given us. Thank you, Father God, for the commissioners and for their willingness to serve the county in this way. We pray, Father God, that you would give them great wisdom, discernment, patience. Pray, Father God, that you would use them in a way that would bless this county. Pray, Father God, that your blessing would rest upon all the proceedings here. Thank you, Lord. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you. And Bob, I think Commissioner Gatto would like to make a few comments, and then we'll turn the meeting over to the Secretary.
Hello, everyone, and thank everyone for coming out. I just want to take a brief moment to not only thank Secretary Griffin and staff, but also all the stakeholders that are here tonight. Since taking office, we, the commissioners, have strived to develop partnerships with all our state agencies, and one of them is the DNR. An important note to that fact is that it's not only locally in Annapolis, but it's everywhere in between. So, the main focus of this meeting today is the Deep Creek Lake and the importance of that to our county and state, and that cannot be understated. When you think about Garrett County, 20% of our total acreage is state-owned properties, many of those managed by the DNR. So our partnership would be greatly beneficial in developing, using, and preserving those areas. Also promote the county and the state. We recently held a meeting to discuss lake issues on August 4th with both MDE and DNR to hear facts surrounding Deep Creek Lake. It was at that meeting that Secretary Griffin offered to come to our county to start a yearly update on the state of the lake for Garrett County. So today we take him up on that offer. For I'm sure you will share many of those same facts he shared with us in that meeting. And again, I want to thank him very much for coming. I'm going to turn the meeting over to him, and I'm sure he'll have a lot of questions about the meeting. Thanks.
Did everybody hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioners. And as Commissioner Gatto mentioned, we had a long meeting with the Commissioners and your delegation. Senator Edwards, Delegate Bledsoe, and others, both Department of Natural Resources folks and Maryland Department of the Environment. And that was in August. And one of the suggestions that came out of that meeting was the commissioners asked us to come up annually and present sort of a status of where we see the lake, at least in terms of some of the more recent activities that we have been engaged in terms of commencing a monitoring program a few years back and other related issues. And we know that this issue of lake levels has been something keenly on your minds in this county and community for some time. So we invited the executive John Grace to come up with us and join us in this presentation. I'm going to do an overview and then close. Bruce Michael, who is the head of our Resource Assessment Service at DNR and who oversees the monitoring program that we do on the lake, is going to provide some more detail. Remember, please, that we've been at this about 3 years, so we're developing a baseline of data that one needs in order to look at trends over time as we maintain, hopefully expand this monitoring program. As I mentioned, John Grace, who runs the water appropriations program, the big program at the Department of the Environment, is going to then come up and talk a little bit about lake levels and issues associated with the recent permit that was granted. And then lastly, I want to introduce other folks from the Department of Natural Resources here, if you allow me to do that. Going left to right, as I face them, Joe Gill is our Deputy Secretary. Joe spent a lot of time with the Property and Review Board, I know, and other folks up here in recent times. Next to Joe is John Wilson, who's a frequent visitor up here and does a lot of work related to the lake. He's with our Land Planning and Acquisition Unit. And Bob Gaudette is the head of our Voting Services Administration. Let's see, Bruce, I already mentioned you. He's on drums over here. We also have with us Carolyn Matthews, whom you all know is our lake manager. Carolyn, next to her right, is Cindy Ecker, who's our regional park manager for the Western region. Then we have some of our finest, whom you know well, and see more often than I'm afraid I do, our natural resources police officers in this region, and some of our other park rangers. So that sort of completes the list. Just wanted to start with a brief history. I came to the department as a deputy secretary in 1984, and not too long before that, as some of you know, some of you may not, the department had entered into an agreement with the utility that owned the hydro facility here at Kennewick to manage the lake on behalf of the utility and for the county. And as I remember it, my memory's fading in my old age. I think the reason for that is the lake had gotten to the point in terms of development around it and the recreational uses that the utility was having a hard time keeping up with it and felt that it made sense for somebody like DNR to manage it. So we entered into an agreement to do that, as I know some of you know. In more recent times, when I was the secretary of the department the first time around in the mid-90s, Kennewick, as you know, was interested in selling off the lake. What does that mean? The lake itself, the bottom, and the buffer. And there was quite a lot of concern raised here, understandably, that if they sold that to a new utility that didn't have the same interests and values as Kennewick had, which is to say, they may not, in selling it, have wanted to maintain the rights of access that existed to the lake, or in fact the use of the lake. That may have been a very problematic situation and disenfranchised all those who enjoy the lake, property owners and others. So the state stepped in and purchased the lake. Now, I was involved for a long time in those negotiations, and then I left DNR. I think it took about a year and a half before those were concluded and got into issues like the buy down, the buffer, and all that. I have my own opinions about that, but I wasn't here when that was done. Anyway, that's just an introduction. I might say, as both commissioners mentioned in their remarks, we welcome the opportunity to work more closely with your county government, your elected leaders on the lake as we move forward. We've also already had some good examples of a better partnership because this is not only certainly the major economic and recreational asset here in your lovely county, but it is also a major asset to the state of Maryland. Again, I'm going to do some overview slides here and then turn it over to Bruce. Bruce? All of you see this fairly well? I know you're not going to be able to see probably all that print, but the point of all this is the lake is a reflection of the Deep Creek Lake watershed. As you know, the lake itself is only a small portion of this watershed. Most of the watershed is made up of private land holdings. We own the lake bottom, the water, and a buffer around it. And so what happens in the larger lake watershed on the land ultimately affects the quality and resourcefulness of the lake itself. And this is something we learned years ago on the Chesapeake Bay. The Chesapeake Bay is basically like a big sink, and everything that drains into it from a 64,000 mile square watershed, 6 states, pretty much stays in there. I mean, there's more flushing action in the bay, obviously, than there is in Deep Creek Lake and its tidal and as compared to the lake. But the whole idea here that what goes in basically stays in, that it's a bathtub without a whole lot of drains, is an important fact to keep in mind. And I just want to say that a polluted lake would represent a very severe blow to the various economies associated with the lake and the property values around it. And I'm sure no one in this room wants to see the lake get to that point. We certainly don't. Next slide. So I think in broad terms, at least the way we see the lake, there are 3 broad goals. First of all, to protect the lake as a man-made resource. As you know, but for the hydroelectric facility and the dam, we would not have a lake to enjoy. So in our thinking as we continue to move forward on management of the lake and best uses of the lake, we need to keep in mind the fact that the new utility needs to at least remain profitable so that they don't do what Penelec ended up doing and close down the lake. And of course, this lake provides all the benefits that we all enjoy, not only residents but visitors, in terms of the recreational uses on the lake. It also is able to serve a very well-regarded trout fishery and does provide as well releases, as you know, which support in certain areas of the county fairly active whitewater rafting businesses. We also want to preserve the ecological balance of the lake, and we want to maintain it as a recreational and economic asset for the county and for the state. So you can look at these goals, and I guess the major point I would make here is a question of balance. We have to make sure we keep all these in balance so that we don't lose the very asset that draws so many people here upon which the economy of the county in particular and also the state relies. I'm going to give you a few thoughts here in terms of where we are with our monitoring program. And as I said, Bruce Michaels, who heads our Resource Assessment Service, is going to give you perhaps more detail than you want to know. But the current monitoring program, again, as I mentioned earlier, provides a baseline that will allow us over time, hopefully, to track trends in terms of changes in the lake attributable to, in part, changes in the larger watershed. That's number one. Number two, current water quality supports aquatic life, recreational activities, swimming, boating, fishing, industrial, hydropower and irrigation, and downstream uses, as I mentioned a moment ago. We find today that the lake has a diverse aquatic plant community with a wide range of species ranging from the microscopic plankton species to vascular aquatic plants. I know there's one that's of concern to many of you that we're going to talk about here today. And sediment rates in the cove areas can vary. Some haven't gotten any, some have gotten deeper, some have not changed, and some, as we know, are becoming shallower. That's another issue. But overall, based again on our 3 years of monitoring data, the overall state of the lake is healthy, which is good news, good water quality, diverse plant and animal life, and moderate loads of nutrients. That's not to say that there aren't some areas of concern. We classify streams according to their biological integrity. And remember, the streams that feed into the lake, not all of them, are not against an ideal stream in terms of the biology of the stream, not necessarily the water quality, are not in great shape. And some of the coves, as we know, as I mentioned earlier, are getting shallower, and those present some unique challenges for us. Don't be too turned off by this next chart. This just shows the evolution of most lakes in terms of their trophic state. Forget what's in the middle in terms of the various descriptions of trophic states for the moment, and look on the right side. I'm going to start from the bottom and go up. The first stage of a lake is really a very clear lake that doesn't have very much aquatic life. It's very under-enriched with nutrients, and therefore not a whole lot grows. There's not a lot of fish species in them. The next stage up is mesotrophic, and that's moderate nutrients, supports diverse aquatic and habitat and fisheries. That's where Deep Creek Lake is at the moment, in a good position. And then you go to eutrophic, which when we started, when the EPA completed an 8-year study by way of comparison on the Chesapeake Bay, that ended about 1982, its general findings back then, those years ago, was that the Chesapeake Bay, generally speaking, was over-enriched in nutrients. It was getting over-fertilized. Now, in some areas, it's worse than that, and it's polluted over those roughly 30 years since we learned more about the ills of the Chesapeake Bay. So, again, we want to keep Deep Creek Lake in the second band now, if that makes any sense to all of you. Back in 2008, we, as we started to do the monitoring program here, we formed a technical group, Maryland DNR, Maryland Department of the Environment, U.S. Geological Survey. We have county representatives on it, citizen representatives too from the Property Owners Association, one of whom I think is a member of the Property Review Board. And please excuse me, I meant to mention this earlier. Finally had the opportunity to meet personally the new chair of the PRB, David Meyerberg, just a moment ago before we started. And he gave me and Joe Gill, our deputy, these for our cars. And even though we're not supposed to put these stickers on state cars, I'm going to put it on there anyway. And John Wilson, whom you know, chairs this group, and other governmental folks attend from time to time, but it's a coordinating group to take a look at the state of our monitoring program to help understand it and to ask that group to disseminate information as broadly as possible to the larger Garrett County community. Okay, I'm going to stop there. Bruce is going to take over and go through some of the details of this monitoring program, and then John Grace. I'll be back up at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And I certainly want to thank the county commissioners for this opportunity to come here today. I've been coming up to Deep Creek Lake in Garrett County, for many years, mostly in the wintertime, doing a lot of cross-country skiing. I have been working on water quality and habitat issues since 1985 for the department. And over the last 3 years, it's certainly been a pleasure to come up here and see actually good water quality compared to what we see in the Chesapeake Bay. So we certainly want to continue that effort. As John indicated, we developed this water quality monitoring program for the lake. We're committed to maintaining a long-term comprehensive monitoring program. Again, to characterize existing water quality conditions. This is what we've been doing over the last couple years. We're looking at the lake itself, the main stem, and the coves. We want to establish a baseline condition to evaluate trends over time, to look at the potential impacts from development, land use changes, or whatever we have here, and we want to make sure that we assess the health of the lake and these potential impacts. We're looking at defining the existing plankton community as well as looking at the streams. We have, working with USGS and their gauging stations, we're actually looking at trying to determine the nutrient loads. So we're collecting storm event samples, water samples, where we look at nutrients and sediment to look at actually what's coming into the lake as well. All right, this is a map of our monitoring stations. The red circles are our main stem stations. The blue squares are our cove stations. And then the two tributary monitoring stations at Cherry Creek Run and Pullen Run are also on that map as well. Okay, we have a total of 16 sites. 7 sites are on the main stem of the lake, 9 are in the selected coves. We sample during all seasons, spring, summer, and fall. We also do 2 winter samples where we actually break through the ice and collect water quality samples. Our field monitoring teams go out on a vessel. They do a full suite of physical profiles. They drop what we use as a YSI instrument that takes physical parameters as far as assessing water clarity, dissolved oxygen, temperature, pH, and conductivity. We also collect an actual water sample that we ship back to a lab where they analyze the nutrients so we can evaluate that as well. We're looking at nutrients in sediment, and chlorophyll, nitrogen, and phosphorus species. We've had this program, we started this in 2009. In 2010, we implemented an aquatic plant survey as well. We did an aerial survey over the lake that didn't provide as much information as we wanted because the plants grow so deep out here because you have great water clarity. Water clarity in Deep Creek Lake goes down to, we have plants growing down to at least 20 feet. Chesapeake Bay, no plants grow below 6 feet because it's too turbid and there's no plants deeper than that. In 2010 and 11, working with Maryland Geological Survey, which is also under Resource Assessment, my division, we implemented phase 1 of sediment management plan. And that was to look at the sedimentation rates in a variety of coves throughout the lake. And MDE actually implemented a shallow water monitoring program in 2010 and 11 in response to complaints about algal blooms and fish kills. So they actually collected some information as well. All the data that's collected by MDE, DNR, we share this information. We coordinate our monitoring program. It's actually good to have some overlap stations so we can actually compare the data between the 2 agencies. Okay. All right, last year, in the data that we collected, showed no observations in the surface waters of oxygen levels below 5 milligrams per liter. This is good on the surface. The bottom water, we still have hypoxic conditions, or basically dissolved oxygen that is less than 5 milligrams per liter. This is due to the natural deep water of the lake. You're going to have that every year. Our pH values were all good except for one value, which was less than 6.5. Our surface temperatures this year, we actually had warm surface temperatures due to the extreme air temperatures that we had this year. But this is not something to be too concerned about. There's nothing we can really do about the air temperature. Extremely warm temperatures actually can stress fish. In 2010, we actually had a fish kill that was probably accelerated the stress to fish populations. But anyway, we continue to monitor those parameters. Garrett County Health Department in 2011 did not find any accelerated or high levels of bacteria, which could potentially cause a swimming closure, but the water quality was good in 2011 and there were no exceedances. All right, our underwater grasses. We developed a survey in 2010 and continued it in 2011. Grasses are a key component to a healthy ecosystem. They reduce nutrients, they stabilize sediments, they provide habitat for fish, and they also provide food for waterfowl. Our initial survey was to identify the species, see if we have a diverse community. And out of the survey over the last 2 years, we've identified 16 plants, underwater grasses, different species, and 2 macroalgae. All of this indicates that there is a very diverse population and a healthy population from what we have seen over the last 2 years. All right, the plants grow to a depth of about 16 to 20 feet. Again, in contrast to the Chesapeake Bay, nothing grows deeper than 6 meters because of the poor water clarity. Fish were present in all of our transects. Unfortunately, we only have 6 transects. We only looked at 6 different coves, which is a small sampling of the entire lake. In the future, we plan to expand on that. The water near the piers that had SAV, or the underwater grasses, removed actually had worse water clarity than areas where we had seen plants. And finally, Eurasian water milfoil, you've heard a lot about that. In our surveys on the 6 sites, the 6 transects that we looked at, there was no difference, discernible difference between 2010 and 2011 as far as the amount of Eurasian water milfoil that we saw in those limited segments. That doesn't mean that it's not in other areas and it could be expanding. Okay. To address Eurasian water milfoil in the lake, we realize that there's been a lot of concern over the last year. People are complaining that it's exploding over the lake. What we're actually doing is doing a reconnaissance. We actually had field staff out there today making a survey of the entire lake. And water milfoil is more of a cold water species. It is still present in the lake, even though it has died back. But with the lake levels down, this was a good opportunity to go out there and do an initial reconnaissance survey to implement a more detailed study of Eurasian water milfoil the upcoming spring and summer. We're going to develop a targeted strategy to look at this and assess the spatial distribution over the entire lake. We're going to recommend additional monitoring efforts. SAV, we're going to look at the budgets and costs that are associated with this, and we're working to come up with that plan right now. And we're going to use the existing 2 years worth of data, plus the extensive information that we're collecting now and over the next year to develop this strategy in 2012. And we're going to work with the property owners to look at some potential intermediate steps that we can do to protect infrastructure for the upcoming year. Tackling Eurasian water milfoil is very difficult. There's no easy answer. We're not going to be able to eradicate it. Milfoil is through most lakes within the state of Maryland. It's in the Chesapeake Bay, and unfortunately it's here. But as long as it doesn't become a dominant species and overrun everything else, then we should not have a problem. Water milfoil can only grow in deep peak lake at a range between about 6 and 24 meters. Anything below 24 meters, it doesn't get enough light to grow. It also doesn't like to be exposed to cold air temperatures, so the drawdown of 2 meters or 6 feet during the winter keeps it from growing in those very shallow habitats. This means that basically the only available habitat is about 40% of the entire lake. There's no way that it can grow over 100% of the lake because it doesn't have enough light to grow in deeper depths. So that is one good thing. Our survey will begin in earnest in the spring of next year, and we will design that and work with the Park Service to get this done. All right. Now I want to talk about some results from our sediment survey that was conducted by Maryland Geological Survey. Again, we looked at 10 separate codes last year, 2011. We went out and did bathymetry work, characterizing the depth of the codes today and compared it to readings that we had back in 1974. And out of that survey, out of the 10 sites that we looked at, and again, these were representative sites, we didn't have the resources to analyze every single code. So we know that some people will come back and say, well, what about my code? We're going to try to address that in phase 2. But out of that, we looked at all the codes. Out of the 10 codes, 2 of the codes had erosion. 3 of the codes basically were remaining same, and 5 of the codes were actually having accumulation. Next slide. And this is basically the names of the codes and what we actually saw. You can see the new 2 codes in the northern section, Brushy Run, Gravelly Run Cove, were actually getting deeper, and that's because of high flows coming in erodes the sediment away. There were some coves that really had no significant change. Hickory Ridge, Turkey Neck Cove, and Hazelhurst Cove, those basically we didn't see much in change over that almost 40-year time period. And then the depositional sites, basically 5 sites where we actually did see sediment over a half a foot in that 40-year time frame. Compared to the Chesapeake Bay, where we see some coves and embayments silting in at a rate of 10 inches a year or more. Okay, phase 2 of the sediment management plan. We're working with trying to identify the resources to implement this over the coming year. We're working with the county commissioners here. DNR is looking at resources as well. The objectives or goals of phase 2 will actually be to characterize that sediment in the coves that are accumulating sediment. We're not going to worry about the depositional coves. We don't have a problem there. We won't worry about coves that don't seem to are in steady state. But we're going to focus on those coves where we're actually seeing sedimentation rate. And this doesn't mean that those are the only 5 coves that we'll look at. We'll look at other coves as well and get input from the community on that issue. We're going to conduct alternatives analysis. What's the best way to remove the sediment out of those coves? And there's a whole suite of options that we're going to look at. And what would be the best time of the year. Or also, where do you place the material if you dredge, if that's one of the options. Those things all have to be addressed, and we will put forth those potential options. And finally, what we want to do is those areas that are seeing high sedimentation rates, we want to stop that sediment from coming into the coves, and that's extremely important. We can't just dredge it out and let it come back in. So that is the purpose of phase 2 of the study. If funds can be identified, and we're working on that, that could be implemented sometime in 2012, next year. Okay, a quick slide on the status of the fisheries. In the summer of 2010, you all are aware that we had a fish kill of about 10,000 fish. This was attributed to stress on the fish, bacterial infection, and high water temperatures that we had in 2010. It affected mainly yellow perch, walleye, and smallmouth bass. This year's survey indicated that all of those species rebounded. There wasn't a real dramatic impact on that. And as a matter of fact, walleye are among the highest values observed to date in the lake. Largemouth bass catch rates are a little bit lower than usual, and our fisheries department is actually looking at potential stocking options for the upcoming year. That is the end of my portion of the presentation. And I'm going to turn it over now to John Grace from Maryland Department of the Environment, and he will go over some of the lake level issues. Thank you all very much.
Good afternoon, and thank you for including me in this afternoon's presentation on Deep Creek Lake. I'm going to be talking through some of the work that we did over the past year and a half or so, as far as when we were requested by the Policy Review Board to take another look at the water appropriation and use permit that we issued to Brookfield Power. As was mentioned, I work for the Department of the Environment in the Water Supply Program, and our division, my division, has responsibility for water allocation. The reason Brookfield has a permit, a water appropriation and use permit, is because they're diverting water from its or place of natural occurrence. They have a penstock, a tunnel, a hydroelectric plant, and they created the lake. Well, it was created way back then, and they assumed that asset. And that's the reason they have a permit, is because they're the users of the water. They're the ones that control the water that leaves the lake. And the permit was first developed by our agency in 94 to 95 time frame. Prior to that, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission regulated the Penelec, the previous owner, operation. When they decided that it was no longer in their interest to regulate the operation, the state assumed that responsibility. In beginning that first permit, one of the things that happened was there was multiple studies that occurred. They looked at all the issues affecting the water use, including the lake levels, the downstream fishery, the recreational opportunities, and preserving the stream flow in the Occoquan River. All these multiple issues were considered back then, and one of the outcomes, there were multiple outcomes in that first permit, but one of the most significant ones was the establishment of the rule ban. Prior to the permit in 94, the lake level, this is shown on the PPRT's website, that the lake levels typically fluctuated about 5.5 feet in a year. Those are the average lake level fluctuations. So in this chart that we developed in December, in the fall of 2010, after we were requested to look at the permit, we wanted to kind of get an idea of where the water was going, what the uses were, and what were the overall lake fluctuations. The first row measured changes between, we're looking at between July to September, were typically around 3 to 3.5 feet. That prior to the establishment of the rule ban, the fluctuations were about 5.5 feet on average. So that shows one of the achievements of the permit, that it reduced the amount of lake level fluctuation. Second column, then the following columns kind of take you through where the water's going, the following rows. So whitewater releases is one of the significant users of water, and it looks like the value is typically about 1.5 to 1.75 foot for these months. That's the total amount of lake level devoted to whitewater recreation. Temperature enhancement releases, and one thing you might notice is that in '99 there was very little water for whitewater recreation, and that was because in '99 the lake levels coming in to that year were already below the rule ban. In June, lake levels were very low, so very little water was allowed to be released for whitewater recreation. And I'm going to show the lake levels for that year with some other years in one of the subsequent slides. So temperature enhancement releases next. They vary as well. I think if you look at 2007, very small amount compared to 2010. As Bruce mentioned today, 2010 was an extremely hot year.
2007, particularly June and July, were much cooler than any of the subsequent years. So we had very little need for temperature enhancement releases in 2007. In 2010, we had a significant need for temperature enhancement releases. The discretionary and rule ban releases, those are releases that the power generation company makes when prices are high and they have enough water in the lake and there's a need for electricity on the grid. So that's when they have opportunity to release water for power, strictly for power generation. When they release water for power generation, there is opportunity certainly for the whitewater community to take advantage of that. There are notification requirements in the permit that Brookfield has to fulfill to make sure everyone knows when these are happening. Wicket gate, these are the numbers that were developed in the fall. And the wicket gates are a series of gates. If you can think of them like Venetian blinds, vertical Venetian blinds in a circle around the generator. There's a top, a bottom, and they close heel to toe. They're thick. They're 4 inches thick, and they're steel. And they're massive. And they're very difficult to seal all the way. In fact, if you're going to open them, you have to have a little bit of a gap at the top and a little bit at the bottom. Because there's 400 foot ahead on top of the power station, water comes out of there at a pretty good clip. The permit, when it was first developed, we recognized that the estimated amount of loss due to that was 9 CFS. That's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 9 cubic feet per second. When you do the math and you translate that over the course of these months, it comes to about 4/10 of a foot. During the process this past year, we were challenged to really defend that number. We're certain that's what it was. So we asked Brookfield to do measurements. They've done 3 sets of measurements so far. They're going to do another one. The rate that has been measured is around 18 to 20 CFS, depending on climatic conditions, depending on how much other inflow is coming into that tail race area. So that's a significantly greater amount of water than was previously understood to be leaving the lake. They're in the process now of working on their intake structure. I spoke with Glenn Newport, the supervisor of the operation, yesterday. He said to me that they're going to be working on what's called the pressure relief valve that's associated with these wicket gates, and they're going to see what they can achieve in this January and December for reducing that loss. So we're hopeful that we might gain 4 to 5 CFS reduction, which is fairly significant. That's about 1/4 foot over the course of the summer. That's the wicket gate. The bypass is a requirement in the permit to maintain 40 CFS in the Youghiogheny River. The purpose of that is to ensure viable fishery through the summer. The lake, obviously, the creation of the dam doesn't allow any water at all to leave that 62-mile-square watershed. This bypass release is a requirement to ensure adequate water in the Youghiogheny for the fishery. What happened this past year, and I'll get into that a little bit, but what I guess I want to say right now is during dry years and wet years, there's going to be different amounts of bypass required. 2010, which is an extremely hot and dry year, the amount of bypass water required was much more than, say, 2007. And finally, one of the concerns, one of the other permits that I've been involved with on the lake is the permit for WISP, or recreational industries. And there's a lot of times people have voiced concern that that permit has been a significant, or could significantly impact lake levels. Well, we did the math, and really it's, the quantities are very significant. They're hundreds of, hundreds of a foot. So that was good to at least put that in perspective throughout this process. there's evaporative losses, and because we now know that the wicket gate is actually leaking twice, about 8/10 of a foot, these values would reduce by about 4/10. So but the evaporative losses and other things we can't quite quantify add up to about a foot. So it's very helpful for us to put these in perspective. And here's just a slide just to show you what lake levels have done various years. And in 99, this is 99, 2010, where we went into the year doing really well. We had a very, very hot July, a lot of releases, and we hit the lower rule band right about here. And releases continued to drop, but not quite as fast. 2007, I think, is this yellow line. You see we got a lot of rain. Maybe July time frame, bumped the lake level up considerably. The purpose of this is just to show that, I mean, one of the questions that the PRB put to us was, had the change in the permit that happened in 2007 significantly altered the pattern of lake levels? And we thought the data demonstrated that it hadn't significantly altered the pattern, that there's going to be variability, that when you have a wet year, there's plenty of water, we're staying within the rule bands. When you have a very dry year, like in 2010, we took a big hit. There is some, however, we did document some difference between the 2007 permit and the previous permit, and that was the increased amount of water that was dedicated for whitewater recreation. But then, oops. Okay. And I think this slide is going to make the point that I just made. This represents the amount of water coming into the lake, and these are the various years. In 2010, it sits right there. 2009, not too far behind. 2008, which was a medium year, is right about in there. And you can see that there's quite a bit of variability in terms of the amount of water that comes into the lake. The yellow bar represents the rainfall that falls directly on the lake. The blue portion represents the amount of water that the tributaries and the streams and the watershed brings to the lake. Some years we have an incredible amount, like in 2003, the inflow in the lake is enormous, up almost like 12 feet. It's amazing. There's quite a lot of natural variability in stream flow, and that's what makes this challenging to everybody. There's never a year that's the same, and some years can be orders of magnitude different. So we're going to have some bad years ahead, but we're going to have some good years too. I mean that's what we're trying to do in the permit, is to ensure that the amount of water we have is equitably and fairly distributed. And that's really what we try to do here. We went back, we included every stakeholder in our discussions. We had multiple meetings with the PRB subcommittee. DNR was involved right from the get-go with us. We weren't operating in a vacuum in this process. We got a lot of good input. We considered everything as much as possible, fairly, and we came up with these decisions that the lower rule band really had to be preserved. There would be too much of an economic impact on the power plant itself. And John spoke earlier about how important that is, that the power plant remain a viable business operation. They documented that changing the low rule band would significantly impact their revenues up to as much as 140%. So that was not a tenable decision for us to support. But we did believe that it was in everyone's interest to keep more water in the lake in the beginning of the year. Dry year, where you have very little water coming in, the more water you have in the bank, the better off everyone's going to be. So that was really that was a very good recommendation we received from the PRB. We implemented it, and everyone agreed with that. We also gave them, Brookfield, a little more flexibility with storm events that they could handle. They were allowed to keep water levels slightly above the upper rule band. That means they didn't have to operate so low. They could operate now a little higher between the rule bands and not be concerned about exceeding that upper rule band. We preserved the schedule that was negotiated in the prior permit. That was to maintain the commitment that had already been given to the Whitewater community. We thought that changing that commitment in midstream would have been unfair and improper decision. We did realize that we could make some savings in water by not requiring that temperature enhancement releases happen on the same days that Whitewater releases would happen. We effectively reduced the amount of bypass flow because now we measured the actual flow in the tail race. Our requirement is to maintain 40 CF, Brookfield's requirement is to maintain 40 CFS in the yacht. If prior calculations assume that they are only releasing 9, but now we know they're actually releasing 20, you wouldn't have to release as much to get up to the 40. So that represents a savings of water there. And they are going to be submitting a plan to us for addressing the Wicket Gate leak problem. And just wanted to show 2010 versus 2011 water levels in 2010 and 2011 track on a parallel track, but 2011 was about 2 to 3 tenths of a foot and more higher until we got this really nice, a lot of rain in August, and the water levels in September, and it jumped right up. I think that's pretty much it for me. Secretary Griffin.
I just have 2 more slides to wrap up, and then follow the commissioner's lead in terms of how you want to open up forum for questions or criticisms or personal attacks, whatever. Looking ahead, these are just some of the areas that I think the state and the county and all interested stakeholders here need to continue to work on together in collaboration with one another as partners. Management of aquatic plants, Bruce touched this. I just want to emphasize 2 things. One, it's important to avoid the history of precipitous introduction of things because of the law of unintended consequences. I won't bore you with the history that's replete with quick action to respond to a problem which ends up creating a much bigger problem down the line. We are spending a lot of time on this issue with Eurasian water milfoil. As Bruce said, we're going to come up. We're doing sort of an environmental assessment of various ways to deal with this where necessary, and we will have some proposals for all of you to consider before the season begins next summer. Secondly, on the management of stormwater and sediment, this is all sources that drain into the lake. I think working together with the county and state agencies, we need to take a look, try to develop a longer-term plan about how to go back and deal with areas that we need to retrofit, as well as looking ahead in terms of new facilities of whatever size and shape are built. And I think we need to help the county bring funding to the table to help with a lot of those retrofits. One thing we're looking at now, this is one example, is the land, I guess DNR owns, that drains that whole development area where Pizzeria Uno is and the theater and that whole series of complexes to see if we can't find funding to do some retrofits there to capture and treat all that runoff before it hits the lake. That's just one example, but there are many others. Private residences are built, and looking forward as well as trying to work to retrofit other areas around the lake. Protection of shorelines, I think we need to work together to develop some better ways to allow property owners to protect their shoreline than some of the techniques currently deployed. Protection of the buffer strip, As I said to one gentleman who emailed me about this, I know that some of you find this an annoying situation when our lake management office tries to get compliance in the buffer strip. I remarked to this gentleman in a response that if property owners find our enforcement annoying, think about what our fairly limited lake staff has to contend with in trying to go around and try to honor commitments that were made when the lake and the buffer strip were purchased in terms of what property owners couldn't do, particularly in terms of maintaining vegetative cover, getting back to this issue that we talked about, that I talked about a moment ago in terms of stormwater runoff. If you have vegetative cover in this buffer, it's more likely that it will pick it up and attenuate it rather than letting it run off with all the pollutants that are drained when storm events occur. Lastly, management of recreational uses. I think the last time Carolyn advised us that we did a carrying capacity on the lake in terms of recreational uses was 2003. Perhaps it's time for us to try to find the funding to do another one. Anyway, those are just some of the things that I think we need to concentrate on in the immediate to midterm future, working together. Lastly, I think our greatest collective challenge as we go forward in the broadest sense is to take a broader watershed approach to future management of the lake. Remember my earlier slide, to avoid the situation where those various levels of nutrient enrichment of the lake get to the point where we see a polluted lake, which I'm sure none of us, to repeat myself, want to see. And we need to do that through a partnership. I think we're off to a great start, speaking for DNR, with your new Board of County Commissioners, and I think we need to build on that and bring in your cities and towns as appropriate, and obviously your senator and delegate sitting in the back of the room there, taking notes on me, as well as others. I want to leave all of you, before we open this up, with a couple of thoughts. The lake generally is in good health. That's a good thing. We all need to work together, particularly in times like this when everyone's revenues are down because of the economy. Businesses are hurting, therefore government's revenues are down. We're hurting. To combine our limited resources to target them in areas where we can either avoid further problems from developing or deal with current problems. And I want to stand here and pledge to you that my boss, Governor O'Malley, and everyone at the Department of Natural Resources want to sincerely work with all of you to maintain this as a very important asset to your county and to the state of Maryland, and to visitors from, will obviously come here from outside of our lovely state. So, however you want to handle this for... Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, Mr. Michael, Mr. Grace, for coming up and providing those insights. The commissioners do look forward to collaborating with you on issues when we can, to the extent that our funding allows, because this is the only way I think we can really have substantive discussions going forward about the health of the lake. Can I see a show of hands? How many people would like to offer commentary tonight? Just over here, just... What I might suggest is that we start on my right, this side of the room, and we'll just go back table by table, and then we'll flip over to this side, come back up to the front, and move to the back. And that may be the best way to handle it. I don't think we had a sign-up sheet today, did we? No, we didn't. So we'll kind of police ourselves, and perhaps then, if John, maybe you may want to respond at the end, and everybody can make their comments in the essence of time. We do have a number of people. And that way we can kind of get through the commentary. I would just ask that when you come up, please state your name and where you're from for the record. We are recording this, and Barbara Beeler asked that we record it, and we'll have a record of it. So in case we need to go back and see who made what comment, we have a reference. as well. So just respectfully state your name and your piece and your commentary, and if you have similar comments but would still like to be on the record, you're welcome to come up and just say ditto. And then we'll try to leave some time at the end here for the Secretary and Mr. Grace or Mr. Michael to maybe collectively respond to your concerns. So with that, we'll start here at the table behind the commissioners. And Mr. Whitmore, I think that's you.
Yes, I'd like the mayor of Friendsville to
Okay.
go first. On the council. Yeah.
Chairman? Good afternoon, my name is Spencer Schlosser. I am the mayor of Friendsville, and I've been mayor for 26 years, I'm in my 26th year. As many of you know, we have the beautiful Youghiogheny River in Friendsville, which the water flows from Deep Creek Lake down. And back in the 80s, when I went into office in 85, 86, I took office, we had the whitewater rafting industry coming into town. At the time, small, quiet little town, many people refer to it as Mayberry. You know, everything. Who's these folks coming into our town? This is our little town. Well, we've had some difficult things over the years, but now that's behind us. We work with American Whitewater Industries. We work with the local rafting companies. We have approximately 6 companies in the tri-state area that come in and use the Youghiogheny. It's a Class 5 river. One of the gentlemen that has business in town, has been there for close to 30 years, was the alternate member to the U.S. team. It's Roger Bell right here with us. Jess Whitmore's been on that river numerous times. So Friendsville is a vital part of Friendsville in our community. Charlie Walbridge is from Rooster Mills, West Virginia. He kayaked that river back in the 70s and started out there. And it's a Class 5 river. Back in the early 2000s, we worked with community action here in the county to bring in revitalization for all of our municipalities. There's 8 municipalities in this county. And we had a quiet little community that was closed up with storefronts. And we met back in 2003, and some of our top concerns, a town of 500 people had over 50 people in attendance at 4 meetings. And our top items was develop and improve tourism activities in the community, support and enhance the whitewater community industry, improve access to the river for fishing and other recreational activities. It's great to see the kids on the upper yacht, when they're big fishing, they come down and they love to see the fish that they're getting out of the Youghiogheny River. I mean, it's a great asset to our town. It's right into the community. Next is promote use trails in and around town. We had the Kendall Trail. Governor Schaefer came up here years ago when I was in office. First one in, he went in. He wanted to see the Kendall Trail. We took him up. The folks from the DNR, many of those folks back there have been up there with us to see what it is. Well, now we have a beautiful trail that's almost 2 miles in length that we've developed that you can walk along the beautiful Youghiogheny River and see what we have, a natural resource right there. It's God's country. It's beautiful. And the others was to establish, expand, and promote community activities. We have Riverfest activities going on in the community. Restaurants now open 7 days a week throughout the year. I mean, before they were closed up, after the summer. While when she had the restaurant open, had her restaurant back in the 80s, she had the raft burger and the kayak sub and different things because it brought the people into the community. Now we have bed and breakfasts that have opened up, a vegetarian restaurant that opened since 2003, the Friendly Cup Cafe, and different other authentic little businesses, Vision Quest Studios, and all our Lego tours. So it's things that we don't have, and that's what's quaint and great about our little county. That all the different towns, we each have unique things in them. And each of our towns, we meet once a month to talk about our needs and concerns. You know, and the secretary and deputy secretary have been here. The secretary's been in Friendsville numerous times, and he knows what we're going through. For the last few years, it started, okay, these rafters and kayakers are coming in. They're coming in from all over the country and other countries coming to Friendsville. And we had this, wow, this is great. It's an economic boom, but we don't have a place for parking. So the big thing that just happened, we've been talking over here, looking at places for parking to get in. And I talked to the secretary this summer about the conference we were at, the governor and lieutenant governor. Is there any way you can help us out? Well, funds are limited throughout the state as well. We had one citizen who came forward and said, listen, I know that the crisis the state's in, the county's in, and the town's definitely in. I want to donate a 4-acre parcel of land to the town of Friendsville to put in for parking, for the fishery, for the kayakers, for the rafters, for folks using the trails. I've lived in this town all my life, and I want to donate that. Bob Godet over there, his agency, Waterway, he's been very instrumental in helping us developing our community park. We have places down there for the changing rooms at the park. Thank you for that. Now we're working with Ken Rupp, who's been instrumental in helping us to get some fencing in and things. So it's just, I want us to work together on this. But for our town, back where we were, with a budget of $180,000, commissioners will have to give the town over to you because we'll close up. I mean, in many of our towns, with all of our highway user revenue cuts and things, there's no way we can continue to keep businesses alive and keep the town, and the town will be what Kendall, the little town of Kendall was, or Selby School used to be, will no longer be because the people cannot support it. You know, it takes the people that come in here to help us throughout that 6-7 month period. And to bring people in, I know we had one gentleman say he likes to cross and do cross-country skiing. The Canberra Trail has that. We have mountain biking in town. Things we didn't have years ago that people can utilize. And people that come to Deep Creek Lake want to see other parts. They come with quaint little things in the county. So, I mean, please consider what our town has to offer as well as the rest of the county. Thank you for your time.
Hi, I'm Jess Whittemore from the town of Friendsville. I'm a councilman. I just wanted to be short. Thanks for coming, Secretary, and Michelle Grace, and everybody. The town of Friendsville, as Spencer said, is developing. It's one of the few towns that's actually growing. We're actually taking steps to grow our economic base and our resource, to build upon the resource of the river. Partners, a fantastic partnership in American Whitewater and our commercial river outfitters, and the town, as Spencer said, got this 4 acres of property from a woman who wanted to take the boaters off of a highly used road where they were in danger of being hit by vehicles, and put them in the cornfield where they're going to be safe. And that was a very gracious thing of hers. Now we have to develop it. We're getting some funds. We need a lot more funds. And just like our town park, which is one of the greatest parks in Garrett County, we're going to try to develop our parking area to be just as beautiful and nice for our visitors. What I'm here for is I'm technically sufficient in understanding the lake levels and how they relate to the whitewater temperature enhancement releases. We get approximately 66 whitewater dam releases scheduled every year. It varies a little bit. And our economy, since we've the town people have sort of come to terms with the visitors, and some businesses that have already been there are wrapping, they're selling things and that are more sellable to visitors. We have, as Spencer said, new businesses that can't do without the whitewater dam releases. And as time progresses, since 1994 permit and rule ban, as time progresses, our town economy is wrapping around that permit. So when we, and it's a very technical subject. So when we were faced with this triennial review last year that the PRB had requested, of course we respected it and went to the state board meeting and took part in it. And, we were subject to whatever the outcome was then. Now, the Deep Creek Lake Policy Review Board asked for virtually the same thing again for a second year in a row. And that got us all thinking in Friendsville and in the Whitewater community. You know, is this going to go on every year? Friendsville's a little vulnerable in that we're trying to nurture the future of our economic development in that we're trying to stabilize it, if you might say, where we only have 66, we call them business opportunity days, we call them whitewater release days. And that's barely enough for an outside entrepreneur to come into town and bet his new business on. And if there's an annual request to take a substantial amount of those away by the Deep Creek Lake Policy and Review Board, then that entrepreneur who might have taken that opportunity may say, no, it looks like in any given year, a substantial amount of dam releases can be taken away. So, so the town of Friendsville fought real hard to keep those releases last year and this year, and we're going to continue doing so. I do understand the policy review board is to report to Secretary Griffin, and we appreciate that the Maryland Department of Environment got their hands on it this year and ruled, I would say that it was fair and unbiased amount of research again this year over the very same issue. And we appreciate the fairness of the ruling. And we anticipate that if the environment changes over the next decade or more, that the whitewater releases may very well have to be revisited. If the environment gets dry and sunny and hot, the lake evaporates faster. The town of Friendsville understands that some give and take has to happen, as we did in 1994 when whitewater dam releases basically got cut way back. As John Grace mentioned, the fluctuation of the lake got improved greatly. The onslaught of the new permit and the rule ban, it gained an extra couple of feet, sort of on average. Well, that came from dam releases. Okay, Friendsville lost a lot of dam releases in '94. We do have an improved schedule. We have them on Fridays and Saturdays and Mondays that are generally better for economic growth. So we're not all that unhappy about it, but we really want stability. We'd love to strike some sort of a balance where we don't have an annual request to take the dam releases away from us. It's a very nervous and mind-racking thing that we look like we may have to face every year. That's it. That's all I wanted to say. And I thank you for coming, Secretary Griffin.
I will ask everybody to try to be really concise, and I hate to limit anybody's time, but the first two comments went about 15 minutes, and we have about 20-some people in here. We'll be here till 10 o'clock tonight. So I'm going to give everybody 3 minutes, and if I hold this up, those 30 seconds, if you could,
Hello, folks. My name is Roger Zabel, and I'd like to thank Secretary Griffin and the County Commissioners for holding this meeting and allowing us the opportunity to voice our comment. I represent the 6 commercial outfitters that operate whitewater tours on the Youghiogheny River, and we strongly supported the DNR's decision and MPD's decision not to change the appropriation permit for the issue of the rule ban. I've basically been involved with the permitting process since 1994, and I have seen lot of improvement and a lot of change in the whole lake. But our biggest problem, it seems like, with this that we're dealing with is Mother Nature. Basically, in dry years, everybody suffers. And I think this permit, after all the review that it's gone through, does a great job in helping everybody kind of spread the pain around low water. Whitewater loses releases, lake levels drop, but everybody pretty much shares the pain. So again, I'd like to just commend John Grace's office for doing a tremendous job and making this work for all the user groups. Again, thank you guys for coming.
I'm Charlie Walbridge. I'm a board member of American Whitewater. We are an organization which is focused on protecting whitewater rivers, making it easier for people to enjoy them. We have about 5,000 active individual members and probably roughly 60 to 70,000 members through our affiliated clubs. Many of the people who paddle on the Yapagani River are our members. You've heard about whitewater rafting, and it's a very important part of the mix. But what I would tell you is that more than half the people on the river are individual kayakers and canoeists. And these are folks who have traveled a good distance, many of whom, after traveling here for some years, have bought property out in the area. Like me, I used to live in Philadelphia. And the river is very important to us. It's one of 12 whitewater rivers with summer flows, and one of 2 whitewater rivers with expert level whitewater challenges. And I'd like to thank the Secretary and the other folks from DNR for coming here. One thing that I would say is that the temperature releases and the whitewater releases are very closely linked, because our whitewater releases also serve as temperature releases. And we support the fisheries, and we want to contribute to this. We do not want to be in a position of damaging the environment just so that we can run more rivers. Also like to thank the town of Friendsville for their hospitality. American Whitewater has worked with the state parks. We manage the Sang Run access in terms of keeping it clean and cutting the grass. And we're looking forward to working further with the town of Friendsville. Their support for this has been very important to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Next table. Anybody else in this table? And then we'll just go ahead and when you see that person kind of finish up, just go ahead and introduce yourself. And
my name is Judy Fang. I am a full-time resident here at Deep Creek Lake. I'm a property owner, and my property is not on the lake. And I, having listened to what happened here today, I'm really, really angry. I came here originally to talk about Eurasian water milfoil, because it's going to affect each and every one of us that has anything to do with the lake. The lake is going to do what the lake is going to do, and I will let other people speak to that. I went to the last PRB meeting, and all I listened to were whitewater rafters. I have come to this meeting, which is supposed to be about the state of the lake, and all I hear again is whitewater rafting. I think the commissioners will agree with me when I make the following statements. Property owners around Deep Creek Lake pay 61% of the tax base of the county. If there are problems with the lake, that is going to have a major impact on the county. The county means a lot to me. I see a lot of people here. I see a lot of people talking about whitewater. I read the Republican newspaper. I have never seen as many letters to the editor published. I think it's incredibly selfish to tell people who support the lake and support the county in ways that none of you do, that we are selfish, wealthy people. We are not. Guess what? I worked 24/7 before I retired, and the only reason I retired is because my husband was dying. It took me 3.5 hours to come up to this lake. And frequently, I worked while I was up at this lake. To tell me I don't have the right to use my boat on this lake when the people that live on this lake, around the lake, pay an average, and I'm going to guess, of approximately $8,000 a year in property taxes. Now, that doesn't include the $200 a year in what is now called the buffer fee, and all of the other ways that we who live here permanently support the county. And I feel like saying, how dare you come up and turn this into a meeting about bans and whitewater rafting when we have a lake that is facing far more severe problems. None of you pay taxes that are comparable to ours. None of you your people coming in, are they paying a launch fee or not? I don't know. But I think this thing is out of balance. Thank you.
I'm Ellen Williams, and I'm not a country resident, but my family has had property on Creek Lake since 1948. And I'm very concerned about this one. And Secretary Griffin, I appreciate your coming and talking to us. And I'm encouraged by your view of the future, and I like hearing about working together and taking a long view and taking the watershed view. I'm very encouraged to hear that. But I'm going to address my remarks primarily to the three commissioners tonight. I appreciate the time that the three of you have spent in the year you've been in office to get to know the issues of the lake. This is a very welcome and positive change from the past. I'd like to request that the three of you take a leadership position in dealing with issues of the lake. Garrett County perhaps has the most to lose beyond the individual property owners who would lose value of their property if the lake fails, if it becomes so polluted or so overwhelmed with erosion or overflow that we can't use it the way we do now. Also, Garrett County's responsibility for the watershed really puts you in a unique position to provide the most comprehensive perspective and authority for developing and implementing policy. I think we have a leadership vacuum in dealing with the lake. The state owns the lake, but in many ways they appear somewhat reluctant to take the leadership role. For instance, many DNR policies now really are focused on the property owners doing things, such as the property owners are going to have to deal with erosion, and property owners are going to have to deal with erosion at their property. One might think that the Policy and Review Board might be the appropriate entity to provide leadership, but that really isn't their role. By their legal position, their legal role is to provide advice to the Secretary of DNR. That could change, but that's what it is now. But there's certain things that need to happen if we're to preserve Deep Creek Lake, and these will require proactive and aggressive leadership by the three of you. There are many stakeholders involved beyond just the property owners honoring the lake, but there's very little monetary contribution made. Those people immediately around the lake, as friend Judy just referred to. We really must have the business owners in Garrett County invested in the lake, as well as anybody else that has that benefits from the lake. Really, the policy should follow the concept of giving back some of what's earned from the lake. We need to get all stakeholders to work together for the mutual benefit of the lake. We really don't need to be fighting one another for the water in the lake. This is not productive to the community as a whole. We also need to coordinate all of the activities of the various agencies that take place. And finally, there must be a mechanism or an entity to acquire and coordinate the major resources that are going to be needed over the long term to deal with all the problems of the lake. We can't afford to deal with them piecemeal. Thank you very much.
Go ahead, table that.
My name is Ted Russell. I've had property at Deep Creek Lake since 1969. I've lived here full-time since 1989. I live in a shallow cove. I came here because I'm concerned about the milfoil. I'm glad to see, I think the state has finally figured out maybe it's a problem and they're maybe going to do something. So thank you for that. Maybe it's a little late. Probably should have been an inspection process. And maybe there should be yet, because there are probably other nasty aquatic vegetation that might make their way to Deep Creek Lake on visiting boats. I realize you can't expect every boat 100% all the time, so something's better than nothing. I say to the whitewater people, the only thing I have against you guys is you talk too long. The Upper Yacht is a wonderful, unique resource, and I recognize that. And Deep Creek Lake is also. I worked on keeping with the rule bands back 10 years ago and more, and I thought they were a really good balance. I think there's been a little change lately, back in 2007, that may take the lake down a little lower, but it's not too bad in my view. If you need more water for whitewater and for the lake, you might think about the fishing. There's 3 other rivers that have flow from big dams near here, the Potomac, the Savage, and the other part of the Youghiogheny. There's other opportunities for trout fishing, but there's not any other opportunity for great whitewater. So, a little bit about that. On erosion, you know, property owners are sort of being required to protect the state's buffer strip.
Yes.
And I know people that I've talked to have gone through a lot of hassle and jumped through hoops to do something. And the last I heard, the DNR wants you to plant grass. Well, if you've got a 3-foot steep bank of red clay, planting grass down there is not going to do much. Okay, I'm just about done. One other thing. There's always a need for more money to take care of these problems. Well, about 1/3 of Garrett County drains to the Chesapeake. The other 2/3 doesn't. We're all paying a flush tax, so there might be a source of money for Garrett County and Deep Creek Lake.
My name is William Hine. I live on a shallow cove. I had expected, hoped, that I would see a settlement announced by Mr. Griffith on dredging settlement phase 2. A letter went to David Marber indicating pieces of potential settlement. Phase 2 needs to be funded. That letter said, indicated funding in 2013. Are we going to miss a year? That needs to be done. Further question, please, would be, when the study is completed, it will show ways to remediate the silt. Where is the program management authority, operational authority going to exist to accomplish that?
implementation of the program to remediate. Also, if you can't afford phase 2 of the study, where's the revenue stream going to come for remediation?
Anyone else on this side? Come back up to the front here. What? See. Mark, we'll get you to the correct unit.
No. No,
Okay?
no. I
You'll
defer.
wait 3 more minutes.
I'll give him my 20 minutes.
No, I don't need that. Thanks, Bart. My name is Richard Matlick, and I am a property owner on Deep Creek Lake. I've been here for approximately 50 years. My wife's property has been here for 65 years. I've enjoyed the lake. I'm a full-time resident of Allegheny County, Maryland. I purchased my property in 1980, and it adjoins a piece of property that my wife's family owned. We had planned on building a retirement home on Deep Creek Lake. I have now canceled those retirement plans. I think it's a poor investment with the way the lake is being managed, that I would not take and invest my life savings to build a home on Deep Creek Lake. I have grandchildren and will not swim in this lake. You jump in the lake and you're likely to drown because of all the different aquatic grasses that are in this lake. We have a water level problem that I think contributes to that. We talk about there's only 40% of the lake that's subject to these grasses or aquatic growths. That happens to be the 40% that go all the way around the lake. So everybody's affected by it. The work committees that we have studying all this has to be very balanced and not biased, so that everybody that's a partner in this lake gets a chance to have input. The present board that we have, our advisory board, is doing a very good job right now. They're taking their time and they're listening to all of us. I think we have to take and look at the eyes of our grandchildren that wants to look at this lake. Can they swim? Can they water ski? I wouldn't do it. I can't take my grandchild and put out there and have them crash and land and come up looking like Spider-Man with all these webs of grasses on it. As far as the water level goes, I've been on the lake, I said, for 50 years. I see these fancy charts, but I've had my boat in the lake many a time in September. And in the last few years, I have not. Last year, I pulled my boat in the middle of August, and I pulled neighbors' boats in the middle of August because they weren't aware how fast the lake's drawn down. So let's look at the chart of inflows, and let's put up a chart of outflows. Are we going to continue to drain the lake when we don't have inflows? If we have a year where there's no rain, should we continue to draw it down to its bare bottom? Are we going to be like other rivers in the United States where we continue to allow people to take water out of the rivers and out of the lake when the inflows aren't going in? So we have all this data. All we have to do is interpret it in the right manner. We all have